What's going on? Welcome into Empty the Notebook. We have a Super Bowl set, 59 down in New Orleans. I'm Evan alongside Aditi Kikabala, and it's been a fun season, Aditi, and now we have the two teams that are going to compete for a Lombardi Trophy, the Kansas City Chiefs back in this game, and they're taking on a familiar foe, at least in the last 3 years in the Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles. It's been a long morning for me. Flew in from Kansas City, landed in D.C., which is about an hour away at about, I guess, 9 local, and didn't get done last night until pretty late. So we're cooking with gas right now, or running on fumes, however you want to describe it. But pumped to
But your hair still
talk
looks
about
perfect.
these games and kind of feel our way through what was an exciting weekend of NFL football.
But like I said, Evan, your hair still looks perfect.
And the truth is, I haven't showered today. I showered last night. So this is having slept 2 hours and sort of slept on a plane. So it's resilient. I'm proud of the lettuce today. I'll tell you that.
Clearly, there's some hair product out there. You want to give it a plug? Maybe we can get a sponsor.
Yeah, Men's Crew, come at me. I've been using your stuff for years. It's the only thing people want to talk about, and I'd love to get it for free because you guys do charge a pretty penny. Look, let's hop right in. Yeah. I'll just get us going with the KC game against Buffalo last night. It lived up to it, Aditi. Obviously, you're watching at home, and I'm sure you'll have your thoughts just on how it translated through television. You've been to Arrowhead. You know what it's like when that place is rocking, especially at night in the playoffs. But I would say last night rivaled the top experience I've had there, which was, I guess, 2019, whenever they lost to New England in overtime, Tom Brady's last trip to the Super Bowl with the Patriots. And it's just this palpable sensation for the moments. It's such a smart football fan base where it's not loud the whole time. Obviously, when they're on offense, it's not that loud. It's not even that loud on first and second down, but man, on third down and fourth down. And that was the story of this game from my perspective. Obviously, when you're covering the game, there's so much that you have to get through. But sideline view, it was possession down. It was those fourth downs. It was the 2-point conversions. It was the short yardage plays, those moments that Kansas City's defense stepped up. And as much as we made this game about Mahomes and Allen, and they did their thing, I walked away from that thinking if Steve Spagnuolo can be in the Hall of Fame as a defensive coordinator, he should be. So that's kind of just sort of early broad stroke on it. How about for you, Aditi? What struck you for all the buildup to this one and then what we saw over the course of 3.5 hours?
You know, I'll say, Evan, that it's funny because you and I talked about this earlier. I was on the sideline last year for the Bills-Chiefs game that was up in Buffalo. And what I felt so marked by in that game was how in the fourth quarter, it was so obvious that the Chiefs had been in this moment, that the Chiefs fully expected things to go their way, and the Bills got tight. And even watching on TV yesterday, very, very early, it felt like Josh Allen was not as cool and not as comfortable as he'd been all year. It felt like he was a little bit jittery. It felt like the Bills were not quite as, I'll use the same phrase, Evan, as cool and collected as they'd been all season. And you were obviously there. You were there behind the benches. You could see if there seemed to be some chatter, if there was anybody trying to settle Josh Allen in any way or kind of settle the bench. I'd love to hear about that because I'll tell you, through the television, it just seemed like one team had been there in that moment, one team relished that moment, and one team felt like, oh my gosh, this is our chance, but we're a little bit nervous.
You're all over it. Two things struck me. One, early in the game, yes, there were nerves. And I would say that's normal, even if you've been in this game. I've seen Mahomes have moments early in big games like this where he's not as clean. I didn't sense anything from the bench with Josh. He was actually in a pretty zen-like state the whole game. But there was the moment in the second half, in the third quarter, where the momentum completely shifted and they started to run the ball. And James Cook, they went on that 80-yard drive to start the third quarter after stopping Kansas City on their first possession out of halftime. And that's where the game flipped. And obviously that's when it started to become what we expected, a back and forth contest. It was tied at 29 late in the fourth quarter. I think Josh made a few throws, especially that one to Mac Hollins to close out the first half, that got him back to what he wanted to be in that game, which was calculated with his risk, make the big play downfield when he needs to. And then they got back to the run game in the third quarter. And I love that you brought up the term loose and cool, because that was such the narrative and discussion and mindset that they were projecting to us all week during our conversations with Sean McDermott, with Josh, anybody you talk to with that organization. They didn't want to bring the baggage of the previous playoff losses against Kansas City. And I'm not going to say that was the reason why they lost this game, but they didn't seem to be as loose, especially early, to your point. I think the second half, they kind of found their style that had been so effective. But Aditi, and maybe you saw this too, or have more on this, because you've covered the Chiefs so many times. What happened to Buffalo, as I've thought about it over the last, whatever it's been now, 12 hours, they had to chase. And when you're chasing Kansas City, whether it's with points going for two and you fail once, so you got to go back to it. It felt like they were constantly chasing Kansas City, even when they had the lead. And Buffalo throughout this season, what's made them so effective is they've rarely had to chase. And in the games they did have to chase, they often came up short.
You know, it's funny you say this. So we've talked about this on a very personal level. My 9-year-old son, growing up in Pittsburgh, has been a diehard Bills fan for 7 years, since he was 2 years old. And last night, oh, yes. I mean, he was inconsolable last night. He woke up at 5 a.m. this morning, still thinking about that fourth down sneak that he felt should have been a first down, but I'm sure we're going to get to that later. He said to me last night, right in the first quarter, as soon as the Chiefs scored that first touchdown, he just was, oh no, oh no, oh no. And Evan, I spent, I don't know how many minutes trying to tell him, Nico, you can't give up. And there is so much game left. And a game isn't won in a first quarter, and a game isn't won on one possession. But exactly to your point, he is a seasoned Bills fan, even at the age of 9. He is a seasoned football fan, knew exactly what you're saying, that it is very hard to be in that chase position. And you're right about getting back to who they were. The run has been used so effectively since Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator last year. I wish they could have been a little bit more committed to that in some ways. And you look at the way James Cook was running, I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. But again, look, this isn't the end by any means. I mean, the Bills are still a young team. At least that's what I told my son. They are still a young team, and there is still space, and this isn't the end. It's just like the days of Patrick Ewing and Michael Jordan.
Yeah, it's true, but it's probably hard to swallow this morning. Look, we know there was another game happened down in Philly. Yeah. They boat raced the Commanders. We'll touch on that maybe over the course of this show, but we really want to dive into what we know, and that's definitely Chiefs Bills. So we'll have a little bit more on that coming up here on Empty the Notebook. Welcome back into Empty the Notebook, the show that takes you on the sideline in the production meetings and into our notebooks for some of the storylines that we will cover in a game, but also things that maybe don't make the broadcast for a variety of reasons. And one story that I really did want to get into the show last night, Aditi, but now almost seems more appropriate after the game and the way the game unfolded. And it dealt with Josh Allen and a conversation he had with Von Miller going back to the summer or the off season. And he mentioned this a couple times, and this is kind of the nature of our job, a couple times publicly, about having a better perspective on things being written in some way, or the results are going to be what they are. All they can control is their preparation. The ball may fall your way or fall in Dalton Kincaid's hands on a 4th and 5 or fall to the ground. And he's found peace in that. So when we spoke with Josh, I wanted to get a little bit more background because, all right, Vaughn told you this, and this has completely shifted your mindset and given you a sense of calm in these moments, in these big games for a guy who's still trying to get to a Super Bowl. And he laid it out. He was in Cabo for Kyle Allen's wedding, and he gets a text from Von saying, "Hey, are you in Mexico?" And he responds, "Yes." "Oh, where are you?" And he dropped a pin at whatever resort they were at. And Von said, "I'll be there in 5 minutes." And Josh is like, "Cool. All right." So he gets there. Von was in Mexico with his family. They sat around and had some drinks and were talking. And the conversation, which was led by Von, and was in reaction to, in some regard, the time that Von had spent with Aaron Rodgers. And if you've watched Aaron Rodgers' documentary, that Von had developed a relationship with Aaron and has taken part and been interested in some of his practices. And the words that Von used, and I'm going to read them here, that really struck Josh Allen, and he's probably leaning on today, was it's clarity, resigning ourselves to the outcome. The ball rolls where it does. As long as we've given ourselves every opportunity to win, we're okay with what happens. And Von added, "Do all you can do, surrender to the outcome. Sometimes the ball rolls your way." So look, there's nothing revelatory in maybe those sentiments. Those are things we've heard. That is sports. But at least in lead up, and I'd love to talk to Josh once he has some time to recover from this loss, if that has been helpful, because he was strident, and that's been his thought process all year since that conversation. And it was truly put to the test last night.
It's interesting. We had the Bills week 18, and Josh went out of his way to tell us exactly that, Evan, that he has been so much more committed to feeling at peace with the outcome, recognizing what he can control. And so whether it's really adopted or not, he's certainly working at it, because like you just said, we heard the same thing from him. Let's switch it for a minute over to the NFC. And I think that when we talk about outcomes, it's a perfect transition, because that's exactly what Jalen Hurts said yesterday. He said, "I don't care about the stats. I don't care if people think that I'm this great passer or not. I don't care what people say about our offense. All I care about is wins." And how do you argue with the track record that he and Nick Sirianni have put together? And emptying my notebook, this is a 3-year-old notebook or a 2-year-old notebook, I'll tell you that. But a couple of years ago, we were in Philadelphia for an Eagles game, and Nick Sirianni was very unapologetic about the central tenets that mattered the most to him. And they're not about being the play caller. They're not about what numbers his offense is ringing up. They're not about what the perception of him is as any sort of specific mind. They're entirely about the results and about doing things the way that he feels are the right way. So what do I mean by that? When we were in there, he was talking to us about why he had given up his play calling duties. At the time, they went to Shane Steichen, who, of course, is now the Indianapolis Colts head coach. And he said, "You know what? I need to lead this whole team. I need to be present and available to the entire team. And I want to make sure that I am connecting with every member of this team." So when you look at the success of Nick Sirianni and you look at how many changes there are in this team this year, well, certainly that piece hasn't changed. Then Jalen Hurts, every single Friday, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni used to sit together. I believe they still do, but anyway, when we were there, Nick Sirianni said that it was vital to him that he and Jalen Hurts sit for whatever period of time. Sometimes it was 10 minutes, sometimes it was an hour on Fridays, just talking. And he said it wasn't about running through a play script. It wasn't talking about what Jalen Hurts liked on third down. It was talking about being little brothers. It was about being the sons of coaches. It was talking about whole life. Those were the things that Sirianni was so committed to doing, the conversations he was committed to having, just to create some sort of connection with his quarterback. And now, as you see that Jalen Hurts has sort of taken these questions. Nick Sirianni, who was almost run out of town a few games into the season, has taken these questions. Their bond and the defensiveness that Sirianni had in talking about Hurts yesterday, all of that, you can see how the groundwork was laid all that time ago.
No, it's a great story. It's a great background. I think it just further cements that there's so much more to this Philly team that we don't fully understand. The one thing I keep coming back to, though, Aditi, and we don't need to know the answer to it because the truth is it's worked out. But I just wonder what would have happened had the Eagles not gotten Saquon Barkley this year. I don't know if they're in this spot if they don't have Saquon. And that's not to say Nick Sirianni shouldn't be the coach or Jalen Hurts isn't a real franchise quarterback. But what Saquon has done within that team and driven them literally and figuratively to Super Bowl 59 to me is incredible.
But it goes both ways, right? And I was talking actually yesterday to a longtime Giant who now currently works in the NFL about Saquon Barkley and about the Giants moving on from him and how Giants fans feel about this. And Evan, what I said to him yesterday was, there's Saquon Barkley doesn't have a season like the season he just had in New York. It's not as if Saquon Barkley is a 2,000-yard rusher behind that Giants offensive line or that Giants offense or that Giants quarterback play. So it all goes hand in hand. And I'm not trying to say by any means that any running back you could have plugged in there and he would have had the same success. That's not it at all. But the way that Howie Roseman has built that team, and again, I'll use the same phrase, the central philosophy of what the Eagles want to do, they've played to the strengths of the players that they have. It's not about the plays, it's the players. And you're right. And that's why Saquon Barkley had so much sort of force behind him as the MVP. And that's why when the final votes are revealed next week after NFL honors, what that MVP vote is, of course, I fully expect it to be either Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, but Saquon Barkley will be number 3, and those votes will be pretty close because you're absolutely right. Saquon Barkley has meant that much to that team.
And I love what Philly brings to this Super Bowl and what Kansas City obviously continues to bring and what we saw in Buffalo last night. And really what makes the league, in my opinion, the most entertaining is when each team has a truly identifiable personality to them. And Philly, it embodies the city, yes, but this one is unique. It's unique because of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and all that goes into it. If we're going to say, which I often say, it's the best reality sport show in entertainment, you need these types of teams. And so that's why I'm glad that Saquon's now in the mix to add his layer to it. Speaking of Saquon, we're going to throw some flags possibly in our next segment. And the running back continues to be a dominant storyline in the 2024 season. Welcome back into Empty the Notebook. Time to possibly throw some penalty flags. We've got our flags here. The way this works, we'll each present a statement to one another. And if we disagree with it, flag goes up. If we agree with it, then the flag stays in the pocket. And we just got finished talking about the Eagles and what Saquon Barkley has brought to that organization as they make their way back to the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 seasons. And it continues to bring the idea, Aditi, that Saquon has, I don't want to say single-handedly because Derrick Henry has a piece in this as well, but has truly reassessed for the league, front offices, the value of the running back going into next season.
You know what? This one is hard for me. I'm holding the flag in my hand here. I completely...
Have you thrown it or are you just holding it?
I think I'm just holding it. I'm thinking about it. This is kind of one of those moments, like, is the flag coming out or not? Yes, he and Derrick Henry have driven home again how valuable and important the run game is. The reason that I'm holding the flag and sort of wavering is because I don't know if the decision makers will reward the running backs the way that they should be. I don't know if the league is ready to say that running backs are not necessarily as interchangeable as one would think. And again, there's so much more that goes into a run game. The offensive line, the blocking scheme, the quarterback, the wide receiver that gets to draw attention as well. I fear that there are still many, many teams that believe there's a great group of running backs that could be successful, as opposed to really recognizing that, you know what, it's worth paying as much certain running backs. But you're
I
right.
agree with you.
I don't
I think you
say,
can't sort of make this statement based off of what I describe as two outliers in Saquon and Derrick Henry. What I could see, though, Aditi, and we'll get into it draft season, maybe the value of drafting running backs is increased because you're not necessarily dealing with the price tag that you would in free agency, but you're getting them to add the value in hopes of the value that we've gotten from Saquon and Henry in some regard, and James Cook as well. What do you have for me?
all right, well, how about this one? It is time. We know that the NFL has tested this, but it is officially time to use technology and the chips and balls to figure out where balls should be placed on the field.
I don't even need to waver my flag. 100% agree. You know me, I'm Mr. Tech guy over here. But no, if it can avoid what we're all dealing with today when we open up our technology, our phones, and everybody complaining or questioning calls on fourth downs and was he over the line, and I'm seeing like different angles, and it's exhausting. And then there's the fact in game where, I mean, it's more for the guys upstairs in the booth and Gene Steratore, but they're kind of playing this guessing game a little bit. If that could be removed from a broadcast, I think we'd all be better for it. So 100% flag in the pocket. Let's do it.
Not just from the broadcast, but from the conversation. We don't want to hear about whether that really was a conversion on fourth down or not. Let's just know it for sure.
100%. Hey, this was fun. Appreciate you carrying me a little bit, a little weary-eyed here on a Monday after AFC Championship game. We're going to be back next Monday to get set for Super Bowl 59 down in New Orleans. And if you've missed any of this show or any previous shows, head to the NFL on CBS YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.